Good morning. We're going to be talking about some elements of stagecraft today. This is actually a three-part project. The first part is going to involve you and a partner constructing a flat, a working flat that we will be using excuse me, for future productions. Second part will involve painting demonstration. We've got four parts that you will be dividing the flat into for the painting demonstration. And then the third part will be involving a lighting demonstration so that you'll be able to see what effect different kinds of light, different colors of light, and the effects that a gobo would have on a flat as well. So let's start with the basics. The basics are, we've got the flat. This is the basic building block of all scenery construction. A lot of people call it the Hollywood flat because a lot of it is basically modeled after what they did with flats in Hollywood. So essentially, you've got a rectangle that's going to be approximately 4 feet wide by 8 feet tall. That's going to be your finished product. Okay? So, for your flat, you are going to get 4 8-foot 1x4s, and those are going to be used for the basic construction of the frame of the flat. You'll also be getting one 4x8 piece of plywood, very thin plywood, which you will also know it's also referred to as luan, very thin plywood. And you'll also be getting one other 4x4 piece of plywood that's actually going to be 3/4 inch ply. Okay? So, the basics that we start with are, you're going to make your frame out of the 1x4 pine wood. So the frame, you need to remember, you need to have this be 8 feet tall. So 2 of your 1x4s are going to be 8 feet tall. So you're going to have these be the 2 side pieces. So you don't have to do anything to them. There's no cutting, nothing that needs to be done. And for this, the basic tools that you're going to be using, you'll be using a drill, either a battery charged drill or a corded drill with a Phillips head, 4-head screw bit, and you'll be using either a battery operated saw or a corded crosscut saw to make the cuts that you need to make. So you've got your 2 pieces of 1x4 that are 8 feet tall. So you don't want this to be more than 4 feet wide. So if you were to cut the third 1x4 in half, you'd have 2 4-feet pieces, which is great, but that's not what you need to do. In order to get the correct cuts, you need to realize that these pieces of 1x4 are actually 3.5 inches wide on the flat part. But we're going to be turning them so that we're going to make a back box flat so that it will be a lot easier to mount on the stage and screw into the stage floor. So you're going to have the thin part here, so you're creating basically a box. So the thin part of this is actually 3/4 of an inch. They call them 1x4s, but they're actually 3/4 of an inch by 3.5. So you've got 3/4 of an inch on each side. So you've got a total of 1.5 inches. So as opposed to taking an 8-foot, cutting it in half, you're going to have a 4-foot piece. And a 4-foot piece is going to make it too wide. So you want to make sure you're going to take 1.5 inches off of 48 inches. So your actual top and bottom pieces are going to be 46.5 inches instead of 48 inches. So you're going to have just a little bit left over once you finish cutting that third 1x4. So now you've got your basic 4 pieces. You now are going to take, remember I said you got 4 8-footers. So you've used 3 of them. You still have 1 left. You're going to take the last 8-footer and you're going to cut another 46.5 inch piece to go in the middle. This is going to help stabilize the flat. All right, so you're going to get these all set up and put them together. You haven't actually screwed them together yet. How you're going to be putting them together, and I missed one thing here, you're going to need a T-square as well, so that you make sure that when you put these together, your corners are square. So, you're going to have all 4 of these laid out. You're then going to take this thicker piece of plywood, because this is going on the back, and this is the 3/4 inch plywood. So it's thicker, it's heavier, it's more stable. It's going to stabilize up the corners and the 2 sides of the flat. So what you're going to do is, you are going to cut 6 triangles out of this piece of plywood. Each triangle, basically you're just looking at a triangle like this, of plywood. Each one is going to go into one of those 6 corners. These go a little bit differently in the middle to get maximum coverage to stabilize it. And then you got the ones up at the top. No, that was not right. Okay, so basically you get all 6 of those cut, and then you get your drill and your screws. Remember, we've got these set so that you've got the thick part is the side part here. But you probably want to use roughly 1.5 inch screws. And you're basically just going to use plywood screws for this, okay? So you're going to probably put 1, 2, 3 screws, ideally, in each one of these. And these, for future reference, for testing purposes, these are called toggles. Those 6 pieces of plywood, okay? So, you get them all set, you put all the nails in, the screws in, and you basically have your frame ready to go. Now you're going to flip it over. And using the T-square, you want to make sure you've got this as square as possible, because you're going to take this piece of plywood now, you're going to put it on top. And you're going to put the piece of plywood on top, and just pretend this has been flipped over here. Well, here I can draw another one. So we've got all of the hardware on the back, the piece of glue on, that thin piece of plywood is going on the top, and you're just going to be putting it in with the screws there. You're going to put some screws in across the middle as well. And then you've got your basic flat done. The most important thing to remember here when you're putting this together is you want to make sure that you have the corners as square as possible, because it's going to make your job a lot easier when you get to the point of putting the facing on it. Okay? You will learn also about, very often they use muslin, very inexpensive cloth that goes on flats as well. Muslin is lighter than the plywood. They're both very, very useful though, and very efficient. So, let's say we've got our basic flat together now. So, the second part you're going to do, you're going to move to the painting demonstration. So for the painting demonstration, you've got 4 different kinds of paint that you're going to be putting on here for 4 different kinds of effect. Well, 4 different kinds of effects. Probably at least 2 different kinds of paint for each one of the 4. So on this, you're going to be putting on, and you will have a tutorial before we move on to the painting portion. So there's going to be a tutorial involving using part of the flat is going to be painted so it looks like stone or brick. Okay? Second part's going to be painted so it looks like wood. Third part's going to be painted so it looks like metal. And then the fourth part is going to be involving probably 2 colors of paint, using some type of a stencil so that it would look like a wallpaper covering or some type of a fabric covering on the paint. So, what you're going to be doing with each one of these is, you are probably going to have 2 colors at a minimum that you'll be using so that you have a contrast between the 2 colors. You're going to be using brushes. You'll probably be using some type of a cloth or a rag. There will also be probably a little bit of a broom being used. And we also have, for the wood, we have a tool that can be used to to be dragged along to make it look like wood grain. And let's see, as far as any other tools, I talked about the stencil. So you're going to be concentrating on the contrast of the two colors, making each one of these look as much as you can like that. And you're also going to be doing a lot with shading and shadow and with texture. So that when you're finished, as much as possible, you want to make sure that these four types have as much appearance of depth as possible, as much three-dimension with them. So that's part 2. Part 3 is the lighting demo. This is probably the easiest part because this is when everything is done. So we're going to take your completed flat, we're going to mount it on stage so it's standing up, and we're going to shine some lighting instruments on it so that you're going to be able to see how different color, based on what the color of the gel is in the lighting instrument, how that's going to affect what that surface looks like. Also, light, we will mount a light on stage to shine up from below, above. We've got 2 LED instruments so that we can program those to change from color to color just with the touch of a button. So it will make the change of appearance in those very easily and quickly apparent. So just to recap, this is probably at least a 2-day thing. It might be longer, but I'm planning on 2 days. So we've got the flat construction is going to take up a good part of the first day of this, and if we're fortunate, we'll start the painting demo. If not, we'll focus the second chunk of this on the painting demonstration, and then the third, just to wrap it up, we'll just kind of have a little bit of fun standing them up and doing the lighting demonstration. And that is your Elements of Stagecraft. Dun dun dun.